Good evening. This is going to be another lecture of mine. The things that I have been researching for years and that I've been researching recently as well. I have actually three things that I want to touch on, that I want to explain, and here I will not have my own ideas. I will only talk about it, what these persons, what these scholars and researchers have been thinking, and their own thoughts, and what they have found out on this topic. I will sometimes dive into my own ideas, but I will state, of course, what I think, and so on. First, I'd like to mention one YouTuber who I follow. I like his videos actually, but the last one I do disagree, and I will tell you in the last section why I disagree with that, or why I claim different things. First of all, ancestralhebrew puts the cultures Yamnaya, Sintashta, Andronovo into the Iranian group, and although he mentions that the areas, Kazakhstan and Russia, and horsemen, he mentions also horsemen, that probably they were in the same culture. I understood it like that. I might be mistaken, but he thinks that the Yamnaya, Sintashta and Andronova are all Indo-Iranian cultures, and the roots of Iranians go back to Kazakhstan and Russia. So I will turn to that later. And I say, if the Yamnaya, Sintashta, Andronova are a culture derived from Kazakhstan and Russia, how can they be Iranian? If they were Iranian, all the Turks must have been Iranian too. That's my claim. So I only draw conclusions, logical conclusions out of their statements. That's what I'm going to do. I don't agree with this hypothesis or whatever he's trying to say. We might have a common history in some parts, but we have a common history with the Scythians, with the Proto-Turks. I will tell you, I will explain later on why. And ancestralhebrew mentions also some cultures. He mentions about the Elam culture, about Turkmenistan, the Bimek culture, and the Med and the Afghans, and the Parthians, who were Iranic. That's what I understood from his recent research. I don't agree with this. I must say, I have been researching a lot, especially on these cultures on this. They are not Iranic, because the term Iranic means to me something else. I will explain later. I know from one historian that Persia was within Iran. So it was a small part of Iran. So the northern part, and it mixed with actually the Indians. That's what I know from that historian. Um, so I think an ancestral Hebrew claims something else. He says that they mixed with Proto-Turks. I'm not sure of that. I haven't researched that part. Uh, and what I found very weird in his presentation was when he mentions the Persian or the Iranians, when he mentions those tribes, uh, all of them, he mentions the Tajiks, the Kurds, uh, and all these cultures, etc. But when he touches on Turkmenistan and the Elams and so on, and the other Turkic cultures, or the Turk, the Turkish cultures actually, that are rooted in especially Central Asia, he doesn't give the people that they were Turks. So what I'm trying to say is, when he mentions Persia, he only mentions the Persian derived communities. He doesn't mention the Turkic communities. So this is actually this discrimination for me. I feel it as if he is trying to leave that part out. So he must include the Turkic countries as well: Turkmenistan, Azerbaijan. Sorry, not Azerbaijan. That's further in the north. I mean Uzbekistan, etc., etc. So there are lots of Turkic countries out of Siberia, which actually are more of a Siberian culture to me, although they may have been under the effect of Iran. They are very much influenced under the Iranian culture, that's right, but it is not true that they speak Indo-Iranian language. That's totally wrong, because they speak Turkic languages, Turkmenistan, Turkestan, and almost all the area in Central Asia speaks Turkic languages. I went to Uzbekistan myself. Even there, even though they speak a kind of Çağatay Turkish, it's a kind of Turkish dialect, I can mostly understand the people who are talking in that dialect, and that Uzbek dialect. And it's a kind of Turkish, very influenced by the Iranian language, right? He could have said the languages spoken in Central Asia are Turkic, but they are very much under the influence of the Iranian language or Indo-European, right? I would have understood that. But when you make a kind of research like that, you must include correct information. It is not right to say that that people speak Indo-European languages in those regions. That's wrong, because they are Turkic people. They speak a Turkic language, and you cannot say that they were not of Kazakhstan or of Kazakh origin, because Siberia and Kazakhstan are the roots of these Turkic languages. And although they might be under the effect of the Iranian or Arab influence, this doesn't make them Iranic or Arab. That's what I want to say about this. I will come to that later. So he could have said, for example, the Tajiks or communities like that are a mixture of the Asian people, the Turkic people, and Iranian people. That would have made sense. Or if he mentioned that the Kurds are kind of Iranic people, that would have been okay, right? But or under the influence of Arabs, for example, because there is much Arab influence in Iran as well. So that would have made sense. I will turn back to these pages later, but first let me continue. Osman Karatay is the second person I would like to mention. He is a historian, a Turkish historian, and he is a very objective person. From what I know, I've been following him recently, and I especially looked into the videos about Scythians, because there is much of a claim that Scythians are Iranic, or there is a dispute going on whether Scythians are Turkic, Proto-Turks, or deriving from Siberia and the steppe. And the Urals and the Altai mountains. What, of course, Barry Cunliffe also supports. But there are also some people, and I would say a majority, claims that only looking at the language, that the Scythians were Iranic. Okay, they might have been under the effect of that language, which of course most of the world is. They are under the effect of English. We are under the effect of English. Does this make us English as well? No. So it is like this. There are lots of Asian countries and lots of African countries who are under the effect of the Arabs, for example. Does this make us Arabs? No. I would give examples like this. So I will come to the Scythians and Osman Karatay, and what he says about the Scythians. He gives especially in his lecture about the Scythians, he doesn't talk very subjectively. He gives us certain names and their research. For example, Herodotus. So he also talks about Kutat-Kubilik and what they claimed and what they taught us about the Scythians. And this made actually very much sense. So I will turn back to Kazakhstan later and Siberia later on with my third video that I watched, but I will tell you later. First, Osman Karatay's, the Turkish historian's Scythian lecture. Now, Herodotus, the Greek, I think he was a philosopher, I'm not sure. So he states that the Scythians were very much in close relationship, and they could understand the language with the Sarmatians. But the Sarmatians didn't speak an Iranian language. They couldn't understand the Iranians. That's what Osman Karatay says. And he is a historian, he must be right. So this is what Herodotus said. It's not what Osman Karatay claims. this is about the writings of Herodotus. So, and Herodotus also states that the Scythians went from the east to the west. That's another thing. So, does this make them Iranian? Another thing is that the Scythians stayed in northern Europe for about 1,000 years. So that's a huge time, and they moved from place to place, etc. But without roaming. That's what he says. The Persians called them Saka, and Herodotus gave them a name, Scythians. And it goes on actually. I don't want to go into details here because otherwise it would take hours. But what happened was that from the Urals and the Altai mountains, the same, mostly the same roots of people, and the ones that knew how to use a barrow and ow, and who could ride horses. Mostly 3 tribes of the Scythians, most of which were of Turkic origin. They went into further west, into what is now Ukraine, into northern Europe. And from history, what Osman Karatay says is that the Scythians tried to make allies with their neighbors, and together they formed groups, and in groups they went further on their horses and their families into further northern Europe. So, okay, Scythians knew about the region. I will turn back to that regional thing later. And they went further to the Mideast. That's also right, because they tried to find some allies, probably. And also they went into Azerbaijan. I'm skipping the details here. And they destroyed certain empires, not big empires, but certain communities, and got stronger. So one fall of a nation or of a community gave rise to another community. So what he says is, what Osman Karatay says is that the leader of the Mets, who were not Iranian, he was poisoned. This is stated in Kutatku Bilik's Divan-ı Lugati Türk, I think. And the poisoning of the king of Med, I think it was a small empire, a Turkic-speaking empire probably, and a Turkic empire, led to the Iranian and Turanian wars. So if there were some Iranian and Turanian wars, this must have been a territorial war, most probably, because probably former Iran tried to fight the Turans who already lived in those areas. And by poisoning probably and by killing the leaders, etc., they tried to capture the area. So most probably the Turanians wanted to be defeated out of their places. So this can also be a reason why the Turanians moved or had to move further. Some of the groups had to move further northwest. Yes, into further the steppe and the territories of Europe. So I think why some people claim that the Azerbaijanis would have been Iranic, and why the Azerbaijanis would claim that they would be of Turkish descent. Here, Osman Karatay gives a good reason. Actually, it is in history that the leader of Turan was killed, and most probably it was the head of the Mets. And probably some Turanic groups like that. So because they were killed, or because some leaders were killed, or maybe the chief was killed, this made Azerbaijan defend their territory. So probably this is one of the reasons why they became nationalistic. But this has nothing to do with nationalism in the way that you understand it, because once there are chiefs murdered, or when you are being wiped out of your own territory, you have to defend your land. And I think that's what the Azerbaijanis did in history and in the past. So there are some legends that Herodotus mentions, but I will only mention one name. He talks about one king, a Scythian leader, who was named Bartatua in his name, and in the legend, there are two main kinds of stories. So Turks now and historians, they think that this person called Bartatua is Alpertunga, which of course makes sense. It may be the old name, or a name that derived from Alpertunga. So another thing is because of the Scythians and because of some Turkic tribes who were already in Europe at that time, the Pechenegs, for example, or the Alans, and even the what were they called? Hazars. The Hazars. What are the Hazars called? Anyway. The Avars, right? Anyway, I will tell you when I remember the name of that community. of those groups, of those Turkic groups, proto-Turkic groups. Actually, when you translate it, it sounds weird. But there were lots of Turkic tribes in Europe when the Huns arrived. This is stated by Eva. This lady is a professor. She is a Turkologist. I can't remember her surname, but she also states about the Alans and all these kinds of proto-Turkic groups who were already in Europe the time when the first Hungarians arrived there. So I would like to mention that Alper Tunga, the chief leader of the Scythians, may have led to the mountainous area where the range of the Alps was called Alp. Why is it that these mountains are called the Alps? So Alp is a Turkish name. It's a very common Turkish name, and out of this, lots of Turkish names derive. For example, Alper, Alperen, lots of names like that. And this is not coincidence that Alper Tunga, the leader of the Scythians, and then the Alp mountains close to Bavaria, actually in Italy and in Switzerland and in Austria, where actually the Scythians, when they arrived, they had already some common roots there. For example, the 8,000. Anyway, I will turn back to that later. Now it's not the time. So it all has a connection. That's what I think. And I want to add this, of course. So there is something about the legends here. But first, I think in Western sources, and I think in Greek sources, what other things are mentioned is the kumas, the things, the traditions that the Turks had. They were used to the cold weather. They used to drink from those times. They used to drink a certain kind of milk from the horse. This is what Herodotus and I think Hippocrates talked. And kumus is a Turkish word, of course, but they called it kumis. Of course, certain words were derived from kumus when you can't, for example, pronounce it. Or Old Greek has lots of Turkish words like this. So, also what Barry Cunliffe, the archaeologist Barry Cunliffe, states in his Scythian lectures is that the Scythians had also a tradition like blood brotherhood. So blood brotherhood is common in Turkish as well. In the Turks, in the Turkish tradition, they call it kan kardeşliği. And once you become blood brothers, you drink your each other's blood. That must have been an ancient tradition of the old Turks, which goes back to probably Paleolithic times, etc. That's what I think. So blood brotherhood was very common in the ancient Turks and Scythians. Even now, even today, we talk about Khan Kardashli, etc. So that's what you call your brother who is very close to you. I mean, your best friend. So Osman Karatay mentions about the types of Scythians. I will not go into details here, but there were at least two kinds of groups of those Scythians who were of Siberian origin. That means the Tatars, Turks, the Turkic people who lived in that area. Most of those, they knew how to use a bow and arrow. And not only those groups of people, but also in that area, most probably also Tajik, Proto-Tajiks, and other kinds of people. They and probably one part of maybe the which is now under Iran, probably the east part of Iran where Turkmens lived. So lots of Turkmen tribes joined those groups, the ones that could ride horses, etc. And of course that ancient tradition that the Scythians had. They came together and they went further west. And of course, not only west, but northwest towards Northern Europe, right? Barry Cunliffe actually explains this. He explains the journey. Actually, he explains it very, very beautifully in his lectures. You can find them on the YouTube channel. He has also written a book on Scythians, Barry Cunliffe, a British archaeologist. And there he states that the Scythians called themselves Saka. So he goes into details there. Another thing that I would like to say is about the Oghuz and the Pechenegs, who already were very familiar with the West. The Pechenegs had one tribe who called themselves Kangar. Now this is very interesting because I would like to mention this again. Do you remember my talk about the Sumerians, where I said the Sumerians called themselves Kengir? Right? So Kangar, Kengir is not very far away. I would say that the Pechenegs, and one tribe of the Pechenegs, because they were mostly in Central Europe, so very close to the Hungarians. I think they were close to the Alans, probably between Austria and Italy, parts like that. And those Pechenegs had one tribe which was very noble, and that tribe called themselves Kangar. So Kangar, Kengir, you see the similarity. I think there is a big connection. There is a close connection with this. This is what I claim. I have my own claims, of course. I can claim, I have the right to claim, because this is what I read, I research, I take my notes, and then I make my own conclusions. I draw my own conclusions, which is not very subjective. right? Actually, it comes to my mind, I see the similarity, and I draw a conclusion. That's what I do. So I would say there is something very logical to what I say, to what I claim, and it might be true. So please continue believing me, or please start believing me. Um, okay, what Osman Karatay does is that he continues talking about the nomadic Scythians, the Scythians that were noble, that had leaders, noble leaders, that they were not kings, but they had a kind of prince leader probably, and also another group of Scythians, but I now forgot about those. So there were groups of Scythians. I think the way they integrated the community uh, into their let's say conquering Northern Europe is very similar to the style of the Ottomans. They had the only difference is that later the Ottomans had mixed leaders of a mixed race. I mean Turkish and some other, for example. Anyway, I'd like to mention the style of the Ottomans, and which was very similar to the style of the Scythians. So you see the similarity between the Ottomans here and the Scythians. Why I gave the example of the Ottomans is because I claim that the Ottomans were not that different from the Scythians. The Seljuks were not so different from the Scythians. They had all their the similar style. They had all, the Oghuz tribe, for example, the Turkic tribes didn't have a different style of conquering. It was all very similar. Um, and I don't think that the Mongol Genghis Khan was real Turkic. They claim that he was a Turkic leader, but I don't think that he was Turkic because he was Mongoloid. I think he was more Chinese than Turkish, because he had a very different style of raiding. So he raided. That's what he did. But the Ottomans never raided. The Scythians never raided. The Seljuks, maybe it was a mixture, I'm not sure, but um, the time when the Seljuks came into parts of Anatolia, um, Anatolia was already a bit, how can I say, it was not very densely populated. People had already partly left the places, and not many communities were living there. So it was not very difficult for the Seljuks to enter Anatolia. So turn back to my topic. I compared the Ottoman style to the Scythian style. You may disagree, but I think it was the same, a very similar style, because Osman Karatay talks about the the Scythian leaders being on the head of the tribe, but forming communities, different communities. I think they had altogether three, and Among them were most probably also Siberians, Proto-Russians, uh, Tatar warriors, let's say. Um, but they didn't go to war actually. They just formed groups in order to go further uh, northwest. And probably among them were some Indo-Iranian groups as well, probably some, the ones that knew, of course, the ones that were close to Central Asia, certain tribes that were close to Turkic tribes, they would would have probably joined those tribes as well. Um, and there are also other scholars who claim that uh, in also in the Ural Mountains there were some tribes who joined the Scythians as well. So it was actually a wave of joinages or joints, or yeah, way of joining, starting from the Altai Mountains, continuing until the Ural Mountains, and from there there was a gradual shift towards Europe. It was not a raid. It was probably most probably inhabiting those areas and uh, trying to integrate the communities, uh, or just an integration and teaching each other things like that. So more peacefully, what I think happened, not so described, not that fearful. Of course, Scythians are described to have beheaded their foes' heads, and they Barry Cunliffe states that they decapitated their their um, their enemies' heads, and they came back to be counted how many heads they had cut off. So according to that, I think they were rewarded. The leaders or the tribal leaders were rewarded. Anyway, I have to stay on the topic. Not too many details about that. So the Sakas are described to have a home on the wheels. I think that's what Herodotus said. He described them on horseback with their homes on their wheels, and he was in contact with them. He lived among them, and he described their roots, and I think when he asked them, this is what Osman Karatay says, and he has made a research on Herodotus, who talked about the Scythians in his writings, and they said to him, Scythians must have said to him that they were the old inhabitants of that area. Now, if they had been the old inhabitants of that area, and if their names were, now I'm going to talk about it, if their names were like Turks, they had names like Turks, for example, Targitai, Hippoxai, Arpoxai, Kodaksai, for example. I mean, Targitai is a Turkish word, it's a Turkish name. Alper Tonga is a Turkish name. Alper is a Turkish name. So Herodotus, why would they lie to Herodotus that they had always lived there? And Herodotus mentions here that the Scythians didn't say that they came from the north or something like that. So this must have been an area where they had always lived. Yes, and they must have been there for ages, probably. And the ancestors were most probably the homeland. I mean, the homeland of the Scythians was the area where they had lived. So they must have lived there long before Herodotus arrived. So there are some stories, there are some ancient stories telling about the Scythians, etc. But I'm skipping this. It's also mentioned here the Tomrus lady on horseback who fought her enemies. So Tomrus could mean Tamir or Demir. So it most probably was under the influence of Indian, because Tamir, I think, is more Indian. It sounds more Indian, and from Tamir we might have softened that word into Demir. So there are lots of Indian common root words with Turkish. So I actually think that, anyway, I will turn to the language thing later, not now. Let's keep with the roots here, and the roots of the Siberians, Central Asia, Northern Asia, and wandering and conquering the Ural Mountains into Northern Europe. So there is another part that Osman Karatay mentions, which is called Tuva. Why am I talking about this? Because I want to prove that that area was not Iranian, which is claimed. So southern Turkestan is mentioned, Tuva is mentioned, Sakas are mentioned, and Kurgan is mentioned. Now, if you have certain names like this, kurgans, for example, burial hounds, where ancient Turks buried there, or let's say, okay, if you don't accept Turks, we must accept the communities who buried their dead in the kurgan style. They were sooner or later mostly related. They had a common ancestry, a certain lifestyle, which separated them from the others. And Osman Karatay says there are no Iranians. There is no kurgan in Iran. So how can the Iranians become Scythians? So the Scythians must have been of another ancient civilization, if you call it civilization. I'm sure they contributed to civilization. Maybe they had a different way of life, but they contributed mostly They were noble people, and they contributed to the cultures that they conquered and they intermixed with. So Tuva, let's turn back to Tuva. Now Tuva is the first source that is mentioned in Saka, among Saka Turks, which was in northern Asia. So kind of area called Tuva, probably close to Mongolia, sorry. So if the source of the Scythians goes back to Tuva, to northern Asia, I mean, did the Iranians go until Asia? I don't understand that part. So surely I would accept if ancestral Hebrew would have made better research to analyze the communities living there, and including the Turks. So he could have said they spoke a kind of Indo-Iranian language. Okay, that's accepted. But you cannot say that in Iran there are if the communities are Turkish speaking or Turkic speaking communities, you cannot say they all speak an Indo-Iranian language or Indo-European language. This is a false claim, because I'm Turkish. I somewhat can understand the Uzbeks when they speak Turkish. They only have a Turkish. They have a different dialect, which is very close to, of course, Iranian. They have Persian influence. He could have said that they are Turkic-speaking languages, under the very much some of which have an Iranian influence, or some of which are under the influence of Iran, Iranian. Sorry, what am I saying? Of Persian, because Persian is the language that you speak, but Iranian are the people, of course. So this would have been okay, but he gives totally wrong information. This is misinformation. So if I don't defend my own roots, if I leave it to other people who claim that Asia was Indo-European, or that Asia spoke Indo-European, or maybe they didn't speak Indo-European at all. Maybe it was a kind of mixed language that they spoke. But later, maybe Indo-European derived out of that language. And maybe it is also the language that the Ural-Altaic languages spoke. The form, I mean, now. Right? So that's we must be very careful in claiming some things. I also criticize here some Western scholars, because most of them don't know Turkish. They don't know the area where the Turkic languages are spoken. And I'm sure if I went to all these areas, I'm sure that I would understand the language. So Turkish is not that far away from those countries, from those Turkic countries. So they must be closer to Turkish than to Persian. That's what I claim. I also think that ancient Persia, or old Persian was more closer to Turkish than Iran, the Iranian, what am I saying, than the Persian today, because Persian and as well as Turkish is very much under the influence of Arabic. So I think there are lots of loan words from Arabic now in our language. Maybe, most probably, Persian was more under the influence of Arabic than Turkish, probably, most probably in the past. Okay, another thing is the haplogroups that I want to mention. I want to mention the haplogroup of the skeletons that were found in the areas which are mentioned by Osman Karatay. Now, Osman Karatay made a research on the skeletons where DNA samples were taken. One of the, of course, these were found in the Korgans, the ancient Turkish burial style, the Scythian burial style. One of them was the Golden Man, who was found in Central Asia. The other was found in, I think, Ukraine. And there was another one who was found in Tuva. And the haplogroup, now I'm not sure of the skeletons, which skeleton it was, but I think it was the skeleton found in Ukraine that haplogroup C was found, and haplogroup C is the haplogroup of Siberia, Mongolia, Siberia, that area. So the mixture of the tribes, or let's say the Scythians, was definitely the root of most probably Kazakh people. I say Kazakh because I want to turn later to more Kazakhstan samples and more Kazakhstan more Kazakhstan examples made from the research of another person called Andrew Collins. But to that later. So we can say then that actually Siberia, the part of Mongolia, and especially Kazakhstan, served to the birth of Scythia. That's what I claim. It has nothing to do with Iran. But of course, which area of Iran is close to Central Asia? So the part of Iran which is close to Central Asia, that group, probably the Turkmens, who are now under the territory of Iran, probably they meant, or they mean this kind of group, but they must mention it. They cannot say Iranians were Scythians. They must say the southeastern part or northeastern part of Iran, the Turkic tribes, were ancient Scythians. So then it is right. You have to distinguish You cannot put all the groups into one bowl. So this is about Osman Karatay stating more about that. I will just have a look if I can find more proof. He mentions actually more to the proof that they were not Iranians, but I'm skipping this because I have already talked for 1 hour. He gives lots of proofs, and I will give the link in my description so that the ones that know Turkish can watch his Scythian lectures. So he also mentions the kind of culture that they contributed to. Okay, he actually talks about the origin of the name. It can be Scusa. I mean, what means now Scythians, and the Greeks, or the Greeks might have taken the name from there, or Ashkusa, Skuda, which means a kind of spear. And also, it could have been a name from Indian, because India puts certain suffixes. It prolongs suffixes. Like, for example, if we have, for example, the word sak, India would say sakama, for example. Or we have, for example, the word Han, which we call, of course, the tribe, the Huns. And in Indian, it's Svetahuna. I mean, they prolong the word and they put prefixes and suffixes after it. So actually, it is only one syllable word. I will make a study on languages as well. I will continue with the languages and with the one syllable languages, which I think might have been Turkish. The one syllable languages. Sorry, not language, but the root of the language, the common language, which goes back to a common ancestor that I claimed in my previous video. I think that this one syllable language came out of Turkish as a ancient Turkish, old Turkish, because we mostly had one or two, maximum two syllable words, which of course were probably prolonged by other communities, like, for example, Indian or Persian, and they took it into their own language. That's what I think, and I will make a research on that. I mean, I will compare the languages. I will also compare English and German, and see how it fits into their language. I know a little bit of Italian, but I'm not sure if I can put Italian into that category. I wish I had known Hungarian so that I could have compared that language as well. Yes. But I'd like to continue with Okay, I'd like to mention as well the the Tocharians. I know this has nothing to do with the Scythians, but um, I want to mention how most probably the West is trying to push the certain communities and ancient civilizations into one group category, which is, of course, maybe most probably not done on purpose, but because of their lack of language, because they don't know Turkish, and because they are not multilingual, they cannot understand the mind of the language, how it all formed. I know German, I know English, I know a little bit Italian, and I know Turkish. And when I hear certain, I know some sentences, Russian and yeah, but and a little bit of French sentences, but that's all. Um, but I can say that I have, if you know more than two languages, and if they are from a different language family, you are able to see the connection easier. And that's what the Western scholars lack. Western scholars, who most of them who only speak English, they cannot understand, or yeah, they cannot understand the mind of the language. They cannot go into the language so that they could make false claims. Because of that, they make false claims. I mean, or let's say they make wrong conclusions, right? Yes, we mentioned the name Saka could have meant something that was only one syllable. And it could have, well, there are certain assumptions, but I will leave this because it will lead to a very long lecture. So most probably in Persian there are lots and lots of Turkish loanwords which must be of Turkish descendant. Like, for example, we say yıl, they say sal. So most probably was more like or they changed it into sal, which sounds more Arabic than our language, not Turkic, but more Arabic. Things like that. So I'm continuing. I have to mention also Mr. Collins as well, I hope. Okay, Herodotus, as I said, he mentioned that the Sakas, that the Scythians, got understood the Sarmatians. They got very well. I mean, they had probably language connections with the Sarmatians. So that means that the Sarmatians were not of an Iranian tribe, if they understood each other. And he also says that Herodotus doesn't mention in his writings that there is nothing about the Scythians written in his in his books that that the Scythians were Iranian or the Sakas were Persian or something like that. So if they had a kind of origin, Persian origin or Iranian origin, he must have written about it. That's what Osman Karatay is claiming. Yes. So Osman Karatay also made certain studies on the language of ancient Persia. So the Scythians went until the Ukraine, okay, and they had a common language. So mostly they spoke the common language. And let's imagine that you are coming from Ukraine towards Asia and towards West Asia. Imagine that you are first facing Western Turkestan, that area. Western Turkestan is, I think, close to Iran. So when you enter West Turkestan, you, okay, it is the language of Turkish. Most of the Turks, they can understand that language. So from West, say if Turkestan, from that language, two branches were formed. One of them was Indian and the other was Iranian. Now, what he tries to say here is not the Turkish language in Western Turkestan, but the ancient language of the area that was spoken, that most probably the Scythians had spoken or were speaking. So, the area of Western Turkestan, that ancient language of Western Turkestan, and the branches that are occurring, which is Sanskrit and Indian, and that branch, and the other branch, which is Iranian, and of course its dialects. So we can say that the root of Indian and Iranian and its dialects and the sister languages, of course, of that area, they go back to West Turkestan, the language of which the Scythians spoke. That is the root of the language, most probably, that the Scythians were speaking. So this is about the language, but as I said, I must make a deep research into this. And Osman Karatay also mentions that the names of the gods never change. And he says, why are there no Iranian gods mentioned, or that have common names with Scythian gods? That's what he says. There are no Scythian gods that contribute to Iranian gods. That's because Herodotus doesn't mention this. That's what he says. Yes, yes. Okay, and he mentions certain words that were taken, for example, dev is in Turkish, diva is actually, I think, the Latin origin. So the words are alive. That's what he says. So I will try to find out most probably the the words that are common, that are alive, and that are found in the European and in the Iranian languages and also in the Turkic languages, the common one syllable words. And I will make a list of them so that we can see one's common language was Scythian and a similar language to Scythian. I also would like to add here that most probably Jules Oppert, because of this reason, he was an Orientalist. And because he probably made research on cuneiform tablets, etc., etc., he found in the area of Turkmenistan. So this is very important. In that area where West Turkestan is mentioned, he found there several cuneiform tablets which had a different form, a slightly different form of symbolism and language, but they were cuneiform tablets. So they must have probably been written in a kind of Scythian language or a similar language like that. It was not Persian. And I'm sure that it was not Persian, but it cannot be deciphered, most probably. I wish somebody was able to decipher that language. Yes. Now, um, 8. Let me see. I have to go with 9. Yes. Now I'm going to talk about a very different person. His name is Andrew Collins, and he has published a video a year ago about Göbekli Tepe and its Siberian roots. Now, why Siberia? Why Kazakhstan? Why Mongolia? Because, as he says, that area, Mongolia, Siberia, contributed very much to the cultures of Göbekli Tepe. That means his theory, what he claims and what he has claimed, is proven right. So he claims that from the Russian steppe, and he calls this community the Scythians. So Scythian, I'm not sure where the root is coming from, but they're not Scythians, right? Scythians, Scythians are not the same ancestral root, probably, but they're similar names. Anyway, Siberians, Scythians, that's probably most probably what Andrew Collins found himself. So what he says is, in Göbekli Tepe, during that time, that was about 15,000 years ago, there was an elite. How did that elite form? Most of the contributors to this group came from the northern and the northeastern Altai mountains and the Ural mountains. Yes, that's what he says. So most probably also from parts of the Ural mountains into the Caucasus, and from there into Anatolia. What he says is that this group of people, the Siberians, the ancient Siberians, that they were most probably the descendants of the Denisovans, and they must have contributed to a very rich culture, the Denisovans, because in the cave in Kazakhstan where the Denisovan bones were found, I think it was the bones of a child. So the DNA analysis was of a Neanderthal mother and a Denisovan father. But that culture, most probably when the Denisovan and the Neanderthal, two very distinct and clever species of Paleolithic times, when the two came together, they most probably had a cultural explosion. That's what Andrew Collins says, and I also agree with this, because I think it was of maybe it led to a time when our ancestors left the caves and turned into living on the ground, most probably, etc., etc. So they must have formed some other kinds of cultural activation, cultivation, etc., which led to further civilization of the prehistoric people. So Andrew Collins says that the origins of Göbeklitepe go back to East Siberia, and the first ideas that were spread were most probably 30,000 years ago, which spread to Mongolia, Siberia, China, etc., and also, of course, to further Asia and into Anatolia. He calls them Scythians. Okay, so a very high culture developed out of the stone carvings, etc., etc. Also jewelry he talks about. So this was, I think this was actually the first contact, maybe, that Denisovans or the Denisovan ancestry, let's say, it might have been. My claim is that this ancestry was not with Homo sapiens, but with the Neanderthal living in Asia, and that mixture came to further Anatolia, because Homo sapiens further lived with the Africans. So the Proto-Turks, I mean, let's say the Turkish roots, I think, were formed with the Denisovans and the Neanderthal mixture living in Asia. But other communities were formed most probably with modern humans living in Africa. So maybe a very small part of, anyway, forget about that. I will turn to that in another session. Now let's turn back to the Denisovans and Andrew Collins. Now, let me just organize this. So, Andrew Collins goes on. He says, this is proven that the Siberians entered into southeast Anatolia and mixed with the Zaza people, the ancient Zaza people of the Zagros Mountains. That's very interesting because some people, some communities, they claim that the Turks arrived later into Anatolia. Now, if this is proven, what Andrew Collins says, the first contact with the east of Anatolia was tens of thousands of years ago. And he says this contact was at least 15,000 years ago. So this proves that Turkey has always had contact with Siberia, the groups coming from Siberia and from the east. So this is nothing new. So we are not the last group that came to Anatolia, and we are not aliens. So some people really must think before they talk. So Andrew Collins also says about the Siberian migration into Göbeklitepe that it was in several ways, not only once. So this reminds me of the Seljuk Turks and the Turks coming to Anatolia from the east. It was not only one wave, it was several waves. This reminds me of the Scythians going further from the Altai and the Urals to Europe. It was not only one wave, it was several waves. That's what I think. Now, there is another connection now that I want to stress here. So waves of migration happen not only once, they happen in waves, and they most probably were not that fearful, they most probably were not that warlike as it is taught in history books. So what else does he say? Yeah, he mentions the Denisova cave, which I mentioned already, and he... Okay. I mentioned also the Zagros Mountains and the area. Okay. So what he says, I'm repeating it, the ancient Siberians, they mixed with the indigenous people of southeastern Anatolia. and from there, or maybe they had certain regions they went before. So they not only mixed with Anatolia, they also mixed with the other Asian areas, the other Asian parts, the other Asian, let's say, now they are countries, of course, but the ancient Siberians mixed with those communities as well, who now live in West Asia. So not only West Asia, I think the Siberians, they mixed all over Asia. And if you consider the Denisovans and the Neanderthals living together, Denisovans must have had a more dominant mixture in Mongolia, China, etc., whereas the Neanderthals were more prominent in Eurasia, Anatolia, and Europe, especially the steppe region. So this gives us another common ancestor. I'm going back. I'm going further back. I mean, this is what I claim. So there are several characteristics, there are several traits that Denisovans have and that Neanderthals have. And this mixture, he says, the mixture of first Denisovans and Neanderthals in the Denisova cave gave way to a cultural explosion, and the other explosion, the other cultural explosion was in Göbekli Tepe. So that was also a cultural explosion. So imagine two communities who are very clever come together and they give way to a cultural explosion. So this was what also happened with the Hungarians and the Turks, who entered northern Europe. So this cultural explosion you see in the Hungarian culture now today. And if you look at the food, for example, if you consider the Indus Valley, if you consider ancient Persia, probably, or if you consider the Mediterranean areas, including Anatolia in the past. So also the parts of Asia, if you take them together, they were all leading into cultural explosions. That's what I claim. So I can say I partly agree with Collins. I go further and say that the area of Çatalhöyük, which is a Paleolithic Neolithic site, was also heavily influenced by the same group of people, because if you take their DNA, I will mention it now and then turn back to another thing. So where is the DNA here? I'd like to mention the DNA of Çatalhöyük. So where is it? There are bones. So certain bones were taken, 800 bones, I think, and 200 were given back. So I'm not sure about the other bones, the haplogroups that were found, but I think we have the right to learn about those haplogroups. So this is my own conclusion. I would like to squeeze this into the presentation now that I have. So in Çatalhöyük, the mitochondrial haplogroups were H, U, N, K, and T. Now, let me tell you that H haplogroup is mainly Indian, Dravidian, Pakistan. U is found in Siberia, Romania, Egyptians, Finland. So you can find it in Siberia, right? And also Finland. So the area where the Neanderthals lived, I suppose. And the N haplogroup is also found in Siberia, Finland, Yakut, and Tuva. So again, Siberia. We had a Y haplogroup. Sorry, I left out the K haplogroup. K haplogroup is found in South and West Asia and in Europe, it says. The T haplogroup is the Near East. So probably the Levant no, that's Middle East. T is Near East. Sorry, I'm sorry. So the Y haplogroup is in the Y haplogroup that was found was G, H, and C. And what was found was the G haplogroup is found in the Caucasus, in Europe, and in South Asia. The H haplogroup again is Pakistani, Indian, Syria. So most probably this was probably an indigenous person. And C haplogroup, which you see Siberia, Yakut. This was most probably also maybe the Siberians, because of their traits, if we were from Neanderthal origin, and all the Neanderthal originating ancestral people and communities and tribes, if they had all the common traits, maybe they had all the same facial features and the same haplogroup or a similar haplogroup, even though if they were in Anatolia or Siberia or southern Europe. No, the steppe part. So most of that part must have had the same or the similar haplogroup or the close haplogroup. So this was about the haplogroup. I have to get my... Wait a minute, I have to pause this.